This week, the Trump administration escalated its war with Harvard, cutting another $450 million in grants to the prestigious university. That's on top of the $2.2 billion already frozen. It's part of a growing political pressure on higher education. Journalist Karen Attiah discusses what she alleges was Columbia University's decision to cancel her popular course on race, media and international affairs. Columbia denies her characterization. Attiah tells Michelle Martin why she's taken the course online now, creating the Resistance Summer School. Their conversation covers how some educators are taking it upon themselves to reimagine the future of higher education.
Thanks, Christiane. Karen Attiah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle, for having me.
So you're an award-winning columnist, former Washington Post Global Opinions editor, the founder of Resistance Summer School. That's an online course that you created after Columbia University declined, and we'll talk about that in a minute, declined to repeat a course that you had taught in the spring of 2024. You said that you'd never had a course like that yourself when you were in grad school. So tell me about the course.
Yeah, so I decided to create a course called Race, Journalism or Media and International Affairs. So looking at the intersection of race and how race is constructed throughout the centuries, how identity is constructed throughout the centuries, basically, and how that intersects with basically how we see the world, how we see other countries, how we see other people, how we see ourselves. And what I argue basically in the course is saying that this is a process that is mediated. It's, if you're in journalism, if you're in Hollywood, it's the stories that we tell about other people that help to drive and reinforce policy. So whether that's, public health policy or refugees, or even, going to war, I think for me, as someone who works in media and has an experience in living and working and reporting from all around the world, it was really an opportunity to bring all of that together. And, sadly, there's not a whole lot of Black people, non-white people that get to be allowed to be experts on the world.
So the course was fully subscribed, all the, people in the seats. You got good reviews for the students. You expected that it would be renewed for the spring of 2025. So when you found out that it wouldn't be renewed, what did they say to you?
I was told that the dean would not be renewing my funding.
And were you given a reason?
Not much. No. To this day, I would still like to know exactly what that decision was about. I still don't have clarity on that. Of course, it was heartbreaking, frustrating. I was crushed. Yeah. It was not only the dream to teach, not only the chance to sort of give back, but there were already students who had approached me from the previous year saying that they were looking forward to the course. So my heart to an extent was breaking for students who, again, said that they felt that they really needed this course, something like this, to be a part of their education, and I wouldn't be able to give it to them.
So you wrote about this in announcing the Resistance Summer School. You sat on it for a bit and you thought to yourself, actually, what I'm going to do is make this kind of, I don't know what's the right word, an open source or open to the public, open to anybody who wanted to participate. It's not free, but it is available for people. And apparently you had this interesting funding model where people who you offered basically a sliding scale, like what people could afford. The course sold out in 48 hours?
Yeah.
As I understand it from the site, you had 500 slots for the course and you got a waiting list of 1,600 people.
It's 2,000 now.
2,000 now. So I'm guessing a little bit popular.
Yeah.
So you said you were crushed when you found out the course would not be renewed at Columbia, but then you decided, you know what, I'm going to teach this course anyway, but I'm going to make it available beyond, this particular environment. What gave you the idea?
Watching what's been happening politically, watching what's been happening at Columbia's campus in terms of the capitulation to Trump's demands over DEI and over, particularly, I think for me, seeing Columbia's willingness to put the departments of Middle East studies, African studies, and South Asian studies under a special receivership just made me think, okay, I have this course, this work, this labor that I'd done for Columbia, and why should it be held hostage, frankly, by an institution that is caving basically on its own values on education? I just felt like I needed to liberate my work. And not just that, I think as a person, seeing what's been happening with, what I would argue is a segregationist purge of teaching about race and teaching about history. I knew from jump that what I was teaching about was going to be possibly targeted. I just wanted to free at least myself in that subject matter, and to an extent the students from institutional cowardice, right? And I think for me, I just also as a person in this moment feeling powerless sometimes watching the news, feeling angry that institutions were caving, I was like, okay, what skills do I have? What could I do? Okay, I've got this course, I've got this syllabus. Let me dust it off, bring it out of the closet, and see if anybody wants to have it.
So you mentioned the receivership. I mean, Columbia isn't acknowledging that they are acceding to that, but it is a fact that more than 50 universities are being investigated by the Trump administration as part of their explicit campaign against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. Their argument is that universities in general, and Columbia in particular, did not do enough, in their view, to protect students from what they consider to be the anti-Semitic overtone of the pro-Palestine protests in that spring. In March of 2025, the Trump administration demanded that Columbia University place its Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies department under administrative receivership for a minimum of 5 years as a condition for restoring federal funding, which they say that they have now stripped them of, as something like $400 million or something like that. Now, Columbia responded on March 21st that they didn't refer to the receivership, but they did appoint a new senior administrator to review leadership and to ensure programs are balanced at that, Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies Department, the Middle East Institute, the Center for Palestine Studies, the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies, and other departments with Middle East programs. And I say all that to say that, do you see what happened to your class per se as part of that? Do you think that it was related to that?
What I see, right, is to an extent what the Trump administration is doing with colleges, and particularly with Columbia University, personally, I would argue, would not have happened if these colleges and universities and frankly corporations were serious about their commitments to diversity. Since the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter protests and all that, we saw so much energy and opportunity and cash and programs, promises about diversity and about rectifying the wrongs of the past, right? And so fast forward to 5 years later, we started seeing how, okay, these institutions were like, their racial justice summer was over, their internships were over, going back to the status quo, right? And so I think to an extent, Trump targeting these so-called woke programs, there's already a bit of a fertile ground because the commitments were already waning. The funding, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's academia, whether it was journalism, we saw a lot of those promises kind of, be rolled back, be pulled back. My course was canceled last year before Trump took office, but I definitely see this as part of, there was already, in a sense, a non-commitment, right? In the true sense of the word. I think that it feels very painfully evident that those commitments to diversity were not much more than branding and marketing to capture, a moment in the post-George Floyd era.
As you would imagine, we because we are journalists, called Columbia to get their take on your perspective on what happened to your class. And they sent us a statement that said, Karen Attiah taught at SIPA as an adjunct professor during the spring 2024 semester. Her class was funded and commissioned for that term. She was subsequently invited to return to teach the same course in the spring of 2025 semester, but she declined. She's also been offered the same opportunity to teach the same course in 2026 at Columbia, which she has not yet accepted. And they go on to say it was a privilege to have her teach our students as both a distinguished journalist and valued alumna. Basically, they're saying they invited you back.
Mm-hmm.
Did they in fact invite you back after initially telling you that the course would not be renewed?
I'll start by working backwards. Their second part of the statement says Columbia invited me back to teach. It doesn't specifically say SIPA. There are talks about would I go to the journalism school? Would I be placed somewhere? Right? And you'd sort of work it out. I just find that interesting that workaround wasn't offered last year, only after this course went viral in terms of me doing that.
So let me just clarify. So you're saying that the invitation to teach in the spring of 2026 was only offered after you had made it clear that you were teaching this course to the public, that you were offering it publicly. So that's the first thing.
Yeah. Correct.
What about saying that you had been invited back for 2025? What's your response to that?
Yeah. So again, the offer that came through was not, let's just say, was not through SIPA's funding. And again, I mean, this has little to do with me having a vendetta against Columbia. Columbia shaped me. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Columbia. But for me, as a person, as someone who cares about the subject matter, I just want to be able to be as free as possible to teach in the way that I would like to teach, and not with the fear that at any moment the axe could come again as the political climate's changed.
Well, you said that in your piece. You said, I don't know what the future of academia in America will look like after all this. I'm both grateful to Columbia for how it shaped me, while also grieving what feels like the loss of the institutional home I knew and loved. But I do know that in a moment of profound crisis, we cannot wait for elite permission or institutional approval to share knowledge and create learning communities. Say a little bit more about why you feel that this is necessary in this moment.
I think I was overcome, and I've spent my entire adult life in these elite institutions. I'm still at the Washington Post in this elite institution. I think for me, it felt like an urgency of this moment. And also, I'm not really doing anything new, frankly. I mean, we know the history of whether it's Black or Jewish professors being cast out by white institutions early on in the century, setting up their own teaching mechanisms, whether it's, I'm guessing, just wrote in the New York Times about flying universities in Eastern Europe when persecuted academics just basically said, you know what, we are going to set up schools in apartments around the countries because the learning doesn't need to stop just because the powers say it should. I'm lucky that I have a job and that I'm working for the Post, but for adjuncts who are scraping by on a few $1,000s per course, living on almost poverty wages with no benefits, no institutional protections. And then on the flip side, students who are paying, $25,000 per semester to be able to access this knowledge. I think for me, just knowing the speed at which these purgings are happening across the country, I just felt like, okay, did it make sense for me to wait on maybe 2026, maybe 2027, well, maybe just wait your turn. I think I was just kind of, nah.
Well, let me ask you this way, though. I'm going to sort of push forward there. A lot of people saw what happened at Columbia in particular, and some other universities, even if people who were sympathetic to and in agreement with some of the messages around Palestine and Israel's war in Gaza, found the behavior of at least some people on these campuses objectionable. They found some of their messaging to be anti-Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's fair?
I think, I was teaching during the protests, during
you absolutely were. Yeah, you sure were. Yeah, you were there.
And so it was a learning environment or a learning lesson in real time, even for my students, because part of the course that I teach on is mass media reporting on protest movements for equality, right? And so I spent some time not only in the encampments, but even, on the outside. Not only did I see and my students as well, all of us talked about this, and we were Jewish, Muslim, Christian, we were all talking about, no matter how you feel, the image that was on the outside of what was happening at Columbia was wildly manipulated, misstated, and all of that. But one thing that touched me about the encampment specifically was I saw these students that were highly sophisticated in terms of how they organized these encampments. These are little towns almost. Mm-hmm. They had libraries, they had first aid care, they had food that was coming in. And I think for me, amidst the controversies, I saw Columbia gave me a living example of even what I'm doing right now, right? And that despite clashes over politics and distractions, that it is possible for people to organize and for learning to still go on, and for professors to be donating their time freely to the community, right? And so to me, it's like that was also the lesson from the protest, and we saw, despite what one might think about the chants and the behavior, the larger question is bringing in a militarized NYPD force to occupy your campus and create it into this war zone, right? Is that okay? And so even though, I'm not going to be on the quad at Columbia, I might be on Zoom or online, as we're seeing broadly, again, outside of Columbia, but broadly, this war, this ideological war that we're having over teaching history, over Black people even having positions of influence and power. I see myself, and, I just feel like I'm trying to do what I saw there, which is just gathering people, whoever wants to listen, and that we will still learn anyway.
Karen Attiah, thank you so much for speaking with us. I'll be interested to hear after your summer school how it all turned out. So thank you for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.